Zoos are supposed to be a safe bridge, right? A way for us to see the wild world up close without the danger. But what happens when that bridge just completely collapses? We're going to dive into some of the most terrifying moments when that line between being an observer and becoming prey just vanished.
Look, we're not just talking about any animals here. These are absolute forces of nature, apex predators with incredible power. And in the stories we're about to unpack, they became these central, terrifying figures in tragedies that happen inside the very walls meant to keep everyone safe. And really, that's the nightmare question that sits at the heart of every single zoo, isn't it? When a tiny bit of human error, a small mechanical failure, or just one bad judgment call happens, well, the consequences can be incredibly fast, brutal, and absolutely permanent. So let's start with the cases where the infrastructure itself, the literal concrete and steel that's supposed to guarantee safety, was the very first domino to fall. I mean, the scene is something straight out of a horror movie. It's Christmas Day, the zoo has just closed. 3 young men are hanging out near the Tiger Grotto when suddenly, Tatiana, a tiger who already had a history of aggression, is out. Just out. And what follows is pure chaos and terror. So how on earth did this happen? Well, investigators found the answer, and it came down to one single fatal number. The wall of the enclosure's moat was a full 3.5 feet shorter than the recommended minimum for Siberian tigers. This wasn't just a small oversight. It was a critical design flaw, and Tatiana found it.
The fallout was just catastrophic. 17-year-old Carlos Sousa Jr. was killed right there. His 2 friends were horrifically mauled. And to make a terrible situation even worse, the emergency response was slow, partly because the first 911 call was actually dismissed as a report about someone with a mental health issue. By the time police finally understood what was happening, the only choice they had left was to shoot and kill Tatiana.
And this was not a one-off thing. 6 years later, all the way across the Atlantic, a totally different kind of structural failure led to a hauntingly similar tragedy. Visitors at the South Lake Safari Zoo just heard a scream from the tiger house. Inside, a 24-year-old keeper named Sarah McClay had somehow ended up in the very same space as a Sumatran tiger.
So what went wrong this time? It all came down to this tiny measurement, which represents a colossal failure in safety. A single bad bolt. That's it. A bolt on a door that was supposed to keep people and tigers apart would just bounce off the frame, leaving a gap. A gap just big enough for a tiger to slip through. It wasn't a wall that was too low, it was a bolt that wasn't strong enough. But the result, so tragically, was the same. Sarah's injuries were later described as unsurvivable.
But physical walls aren't the only barriers that can break. Sometimes the most dangerous breakdown of all is psychological. It's when we start to believe that a wild animal isn't really wild anymore.
Okay, so picture this. This was Kellyanne Wall's daily ritual. For 9 years, she took care of a 350-pound black bear that she had literally raised from a cub. She had a whole system worked out. Throw some dog food to one side of the cage, then quickly clean the other side. It was a routine built on years and years of familiarity, and what she thought was trust. And then, one day, for reasons nobody will ever know, the routine just failed. The bear attacked. A neighbor heard the screams and ran over, only to find a scene of absolute devastation. Kelly was already gone. That system, her system, had worked perfectly for years, until the one day it didn't.
Now, this next case wasn't a pet owner. This was a professional. Dewan was a trainer who had raised this massive 1.6-ton walrus for more than a decade. He was the person closest to this animal on Earth. If anyone understood this creature, it was supposed to be him.
But instinct is such a powerful force. A tourist getting too close for a selfie gets pulled into the water. So Dewan does exactly what you'd expect a trainer to do. He jumps in to save the guy. But the walrus, maybe it was playing, maybe it was confused, it didn't see a difference between the stranger and its longtime caregiver. It just grabbed both of them, and its sheer size and power were fatal for them both.
In some of these incidents, what happens is shaped not just by the animal or the cage, but by the split-second decisions and reactions of the people caught in the middle of it all.
So, September 2014. Visitors at the New Delhi Zoo are just watching in horror as a young man named Masood finds himself inside the enclosure of a white tiger named Vijay. He's backed into a corner, totally vulnerable, and he is literally face to face with one of the most powerful predators on the planet.
But here's the part that is just astonishing when you see the videos. What happened next was nothing.
For several incredibly tense minutes, the tiger, Vijay, just watched him. It didn't lunge, it seemed almost curious. There was a moment, a real window of time, where this could have ended so differently.
But that window was slammed shut by the crowd. People started panicking, they were screaming, and then some of them actually started throwing stones and debris down at the tiger. All that chaos completely agitated Vijay. The calm, curious animal turned into a threatened predator. It lunged and it killed Maqsood within minutes.
The story of St. James Davis it's one of profound love and unimaginable violence. He and his wife raised a chimp named Mo, basically like their own son, but he was taken away after a couple of biting incidents. The real tragedy, though, happened when they went to visit Mo at the sanctuary. 2 other chimps got loose and unleashed this horrific attack, not on a stranger, but on a man they knew was a friend of their kind. The attack was so vicious it was compared to a grizzly bear mauling, leaving St. James with life-altering injuries. So after hearing all these awful stories, what can we actually take away from them? Well, when you start to look at them all together, some really clear and frankly disturbing patterns start to show up.
Yeah, these failures happen on so many levels. First, you've got the bad infrastructure. Tatiana's low wall, Sarah McClay's faulty bolt. Then there's what I call the illusion of domestication, which we saw with Kelly Wall's bear and, you could argue, with St. James's chimps. Then you have the wild card, the unpredictable crowd, which absolutely sealed Maqsood's fate. And finally, a total lack of emergency plans, no tranquilizer guns ready in New Delhi, and a confused, slow response in San Francisco.
When it comes right down to it, these weren't just freak accidents. They were the predictable results of systems failing. Failures in design, failures in our own psychology, failures in crisis management, and failures in our basic understanding of the very animals we're putting on display.
We build these places because we want to feel a connection to the wild, right? To study and admire these amazing creatures from what we think is a safe distance. But these stories, they're a brutal reminder. We might build the walls, but inside those walls, instinct, raw power, and the laws of nature are still king. And when our systems fail, we are reminded with terrifying clarity who's really in charge.